In this video, we're going to cover the onEdit function in Google Apps Script. The onEdit function allows you to automatically do something based on an edit that gets made to a cell in your sheet. And in this case, what we want to do is perform the onEdit function to perform an action when we make an update to a single cell that we specify. So what you see here is what we're actually going to build today. To the left, I have a data set of loan records. You can see currently it goes down to row 51. To the right, we have a place to input new records. And in this last cell, in this range here, once we update this loan amount, what the onEdit function will do is add this new record to the bottom of our existing data set. So in this cell here, I have an automatic max function that takes the max of the loan IDs in column A and just adds 1 to it to get the next sequence. And in this cell here, I just have a drop down to select the branch and a drop down to select the loan type. So after I key in a loan amount for this new record I'm adding, what we should see is it get added automatically to the bottom of this list here. So I'm just going to input a random loan amount, hit enter, and when I scroll down now, you can see in row 52 that new record gets added. So the first thing we want to do here is add a dynamic function to this cell to get the next sequence of the loan ID. So I'm going to insert the max function, apply it to column A. This will return whatever the maximum loan ID number is in this column, and we're going to add 1 to it. Next, I want to add drop-down list for both the location and loan types. So I'm going to go up to data validation. I'm going to select this second option, list of items, and input my values separated by a comma. So I have branch numbers 1 through 4. Going to do the same thing for my loan types. We have 3: auto, business, and mortgage. So now we want to write our code so that each time we input the final input value in cell I3, the loan amount, it takes the data that is in this range of cells here and dynamically adds it to the first blank row in our data set over here. So we're going to go up to extensions and apps script. This try the new editor will appear. I'm just going to close out of that. I like the old one still. So I'm going to click on this untitled project. We'll call this project edits, and I'll rename this function to copy row. We're going to begin by declaring some variables. First variable is going to be called SS. It's going to represent the spreadsheet we're on now, so it's equal to spreadsheet application and then get active spreadsheet. We're going to have a variable that represents the sheet we're currently on, which is called loan data. So we'll call this data sheet. And this is going to be equal to our spreadsheet variable we just created, and then get sheet by name, and that was called loan data. We're going to have a variable called last row because we always want to know what the last row is in our data set in columns A through D. So that's going to be equal to our data sheet variable we just created, and then a method called getLastRow. That will return the row number of the last row that contains values in our data set. Our final variable is going to represent our row of input cells here, which is F3 through I3. So we'll call this data range, and this is going to be equal to our data sheet, and then get range, and that is F3 through I3. And from there we want to get the values from that range. So now we want to add the data from this variable here to whatever our first blank row is in our data set. So again, we're going to reference our data sheet variable, and we want to get range. This time I'm going to select this third option here because it has inputs for a two-dimensional array, which is really what we have. So the first input is our beginning row point, which is going to be equal to our last row plus 1, because the last row variable by itself gets us to the last row that has values in it, and we want the first blank row below that. Our beginning column is in column 1 because we're in column A. The number of rows we have is 1, and the number of columns we have is 4. We want to this time set the values of this range to our data range variable values. Now, after we've run this line of code, what we want to do is clear out the data in these cells here for the next input. We want to keep this formula here because it's dynamic. So again, we're going to reference our data sheet. We're going to get range, and this time we'll use A1 notation, so that's G3 through I3. And we want to clear the content of the cells. So we have everything we want to do except for one thing. We want this code to run automatically each time we input the value, the last data element value here in cell I3. So what we need to do is add a second function, and this time it's a built-in function called onEdit. And the onEdit function is a trigger function. It performs a task based on an event happening. So you can pass an event object to it, which is what this E represents in the parentheses here. And in this case, we have criteria for that event. It must be an edit made to cell I3. So we need to insert an if condition, and we want to reference our event object and then specify range because this involves a range edit, and we want to get A1 notation, which is a method, and we want to test to see if the event object that was edited, if its A1 notation is equal to I3. If it is, then we want to call our copyRow function and have it run. So I'm going to hit save. We'll go back here. We'll add a new record. So I'll hit enter, and you can see the data cleared out here. And when we go down to our row, that data was added here. So I can add another one. And that gets added as well.